You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to the show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
I'm Stephen Cabral, and I want to thank you for joining me here on this weekend's first edition of our Cabral HouseCalls. And if you're new to the show, I just want to let you know this is where we answer our community's wellness, their weight loss, their anti-aging based questions to help you, yes, not only overcome diseases, or as I like to call dis-eases of the body, as well as some weight loss issues, maybe body transformation, but really overall live a healthier, happier life. And that's really what it's all about. So on the show, we do answer some pretty in-depth questions. And as always, I do my best to get to each and every question. Usually we're just about maybe 1 or 2 or 3 weeks behind maximum for everyone's question, but we will get to all of them. Today we have another great show, very different questions. And going forward, as you probably heard from the last couple of weekends shows, what I'm going to do is point towards previous podcasts if I've already answered these questions so I can get to more of your questions faster. All right, so let's get to the first question. It's from Elizabeth. Elizabeth is asking, hello, quick question. Do you recommend raw honey, specifically Manuka, at night with chopped up raw garlic for stomach issues, health in general, and as a part of a parasite cleanse? I heard this is extremely beneficial, the garlic and honey together. Or is it garlic chopped up in coconut oil better? So much info out there, it is overwhelming. Also, what are your thoughts on Manuka honey daily in water? Thank you. Okay. So for anyone who doesn't know what Manuka honey is a very special type of honey. It comes from New Zealand, from the Manuka bush, and it's still created by bees. And so the only really contraindication are people with maybe a bee-based allergy. That's typically what's recommended. If you're allergic to bees or bee stings, you might not want to use this type of honey or any honey in general. But what I also like to say is this, is that I don't use honey for the first 6 weeks of my SIBO, Crohn's, colitis, IBS, Candida-based protocols. And even though it does have antimicrobial properties, the interesting thing is that honey is about 56% fructose. That means it's about 7% too much fructose in order to keep the body balanced in terms of the microbiome. So meaning this, if you have more bad bacteria, we'll just call it, those strains that should be less, like the 20%, as well as yeast overgrowth, it doesn't necessarily selectively feed, at least we don't know that yet, yeast and bacteria inside the gut, especially the small intestine. So, and I know this obviously from clinical practice, that I see it in clinical practice, people use honey and they get bloated sometimes. My recommendation is wait 6 weeks if you have any digestive issues, and then we can start to ease it into your diet, maybe a half a teaspoon in the morning to start, then work your way up to 1 to 2 teaspoons if you would like in your smoothie or just before bed, however you want. I usually use honey in the morning rather than before bed, except in obviously different protocols like allergy-based protocols. I like people to use local honey, which is not Manuka honey, to work on allergies, but that's a different show. So what I would say is I don't use it right away for digestive issues for that very reason, is that it can feed yeast and bacteria. So I use it after 6 weeks. And now the garlic part, again, I don't use garlic either. So I don't use garlic for SIBO, Crohn's, colitis, Candida, because garlic, like onions, is a prebiotic. So it's a tremendous food as an antimicrobial, without a doubt, and even an antifungal. However, the actual sugar inside garlic, and yes, there is carbs, there is sugar inside of garlic, that will feed, because of the fructans inside the garlic, gut bacteria as well. So I don't use that in the beginning. Would I use it for a parasite cleanse? Yes, because we're not talking about bacterial dysbiosis or gut dysbiosis or yeast overgrowth. We're talking about a parasite. So I would absolutely use garlic, and you could use Manuka honey as well, and coconut oil. So you named 3 great ones right there. So what I would say is try them as 3 individual variables. Try just the crushed up garlic. another night, then you can try just the coconut oil. That's probably going to be fine. And then you could also try the Manuka honey with the garlic as well. Now, why would that work better potentially? Well, some of these things feed on sugar. Manuka honey has sugar in it. Not a lot, about 5-6 grams per teaspoon. But what happens is in cancer, I'm not going to get into natural cancer therapies right now, but in natural cancer therapies, they're actually using sugar with other factors, let's say like garlic, because what happens is the sugar is almost like the Trojan horse. So if you understand how cancer cells work or yeast or those types of things, they want the sugar to feed. But as they're getting the sugar, it can be bound with things like the allicin from the garlic that will then kill the cancer cell or kill the parasite as it's taken in the sugar at the same time. Hopefully that makes sense. That's called the Trojan horse theory, and it's been used for quite a bit. Okay, but here's my thing. We have a great proven parasite protocol. Again, we have all of these things just right at stevencabral.com/store. And you can see what we use for our parasite protocol. It works fantastically well, 42 days long, which is the minimum parasite protocol that you should do. One last tip. The reason why Manuka honey is a little different, why it works so well, is that it is a natural antimicrobial. It's higher in something called hydrogen peroxide. That hydrogen peroxide is just a natural antioxidant in its first place because it has extra oxygen molecules. But then it contains two other interesting strains that other honey does not, as far as my knowledge and research. And that's something called methyl glyoxal and dihydroxyacetone. And those specific things as well have just very natural antimicrobial, antipathogen properties, which is why it's used for eczema and psoriasis topically. It can be used they're using in hospitals right now and burns. So anyway, really great stuff. Okay, Anonymous is up next. Hi, Dr. Cabral. My sister has endometriosis and is considering having surgery. It could be hereditary. I have read that DIM Plus is a very good for endometriosis to balance out estrogen. Not sure if you have answered in your podcast before about this and wondered what your thoughts were. Thank you, and thanks for your great podcast. So, my recommendation, Anonymous, is this is very simple and straightforward. Regardless of whether it's hereditary, doesn't really matter. Yes, everything is genetic, so don't worry about that, but it's the expression of these genetics. If you are still having a normal cycle, 24 to 38 days, 28-day cycle, get your hormones tested on day 21, 22, or 23 of your cycle. That means test your estrogen and progesterone. Again, on our website, we have one that says adrenal hormone test. What you want to check is your estrogen levels. They should be, at that point in your cycle, it should be somewhere around, let's say, a 1.5 if you're a little younger in your 20s, maybe a 2. And then your progesterone should be over 100. And you want to have a good estrogen to progesterone ratio. That certainly helps. Now, in terms of endometriosis, you also need to check your sugar levels. So your fasting glucose, you want to make sure that is under 95 in the morning. We've talked about a lot on the podcast, so please do check back on the podcast for all the different ones on blood sugar. And your hemoglobin A1C, you want that at a 5.6 or below, and that's just done with normal blood work. So you can also get all of these things tested, except for the fasting glucose, on our weight loss or weight management test. That will show up as well. Now, if your estrogen levels are a little higher, there's a DIM Plus is probably a good one. I don't know what it is, but we use DIM Evail, and that's by Designs for Health. That's an excellent one as well. So you might want to check that out. We don't sell that on the website, but what I'm going to do is link that up in the show notes. My recommendation, again, is just get tested. If you can't afford the lab test, the functional medicine test, you can have your PCP test all of your levels, including cortisol, testosterone, DHEA, on day 21, 22, or 23 of your cycle. That will certainly help. Okay. Kelly's up next. Hi, Dr. Cabral. I just had a Skype session with you and can't wait to get even healthier. Thank you for dedicating your time to help others. I pray and send well wishes for your way daily. My question, I've been suffering from melasma since my mid-20s. At the time it started, I was on birth control and constantly in the sun. Now, obviously, I stay out of the sun as much as possible to avoid it from darkening. Sun, heat, and also my period can contribute to its darkening at times. I'm assuming this is mainly an internal hormone issue. Do you have a protocol you can share for dealing with melasma internally and topically? I have read many different things that may help, including vitamin C. Also, can you share links for any podcasts or recommendations you make? Thank you for your time. Okay, Kelly, thank you for writing in, and I look forward to helping you as well. I remember our call, and obviously I'm excited to help you with this particular condition. Thank you for writing in so that I can share a little bit about this with others as well. Just do keep in mind, this might be a good time for me to explain essentially how my Skype consultations work. It's simply on our first 60-minute call, I take a very in-depth health history, really get into your story, really listen to you, maybe like a lot of other people have not before, and I just want to know more about you as a person. I want to know about your health history. And so, with this in particular, melasma doesn't come about out of the blue. Even though the cause is unknown to conventional medicine, keep in mind that I've been dealing with this particular issue for many years with a lot of different wellness clients. And so I'll switch back to that in one moment. So basically, after my intake, we then decide to send out for labs. And Kelly, we've decided to send out obviously for labs for yourself, functional medicine labs. Once I get that data back, I spend about an hour sitting down with all of your labs. I sit down with all of the notes that I took on my intake, as well as anything you've sent over. And then I just really digest that. I look at the whole person. And then our next call, the 60-minute call after that, I go through the labs for about a half hour. And then I go through your customized, I call it a personalized wellness plan for the next 30 minutes. So any wellness practitioners out there listening as well, that's how I teach other health practitioners as well to practice, because I don't believe in giving recommendations the very first consultation. I know that everyone wants that, but I don't want to give you a cookie cutter program that's most likely not going to get you results. And the reason for that is that if you have candida or yeast overgrowth, please just do the organic acids test and check that out, or just do the candida protocol. That will help you. But if you have something more in depth that you need help with, that's when we can get more in depth, and I want to make sure that you get results. So, Kelly, you'll obviously be getting your personalized wellness plan very soon. We usually speak about 3 weeks after you've mailed in your labs, so I get those results back. Again, I've worked with Hollywood celebrities, absolutely famous Hollywood celebrities that you would know the names, but you would never know that they have melasma or had melasma, because before they used to cover it up with a lot of makeup, and so you could just never tell. But here's the thing. We've helped them, and here's why. It is sometimes a hormone issue, but truthfully, it's a cortisol issue. It's a stress issue. At some point in life, the body got very, very stressed, very, very acutely. And it's so melasma, sorry, I didn't explain this, is a hyperpigmentation. So you get patches on your skin, sometimes your face, sometimes your arms, and it will get very, very darker skin. That's basically it. And so what we do is we use a couple things that we know absolutely do work. So topically, we use apple cider vinegar on a cotton ball on the skin. We'll use that for about 3 weeks. If that's not getting some of the results that we want, we'll also use hydrogen peroxide. That seems to work well. Both of those things actually are like chemical peels. They peel away the skin. Obviously, we don't want to get too harsh with this. We want to get the skin raw. But over time, it flakes away. We start to get new skin under that. Another thing that works well too is grapefruit seed extract and a little bit of argan oil or a little bit of olive oil, or just even a little water diluted, because it's very, very strong. You always want to test just like a nickel-sized patch at first to make sure you don't have a reaction to it. And then grapefruit seed extract, you can use the capsules or you can use the drops. Right around 5 drops 2 to 3 times a day for about a month or so of the maximum strength grapefruit seed extract drops. That's really fantastic. Yes, vitamin C can help, so can zinc, and those help to rebuild tissue as well. But really, from a longer term perspective, we're looking at hormone balance too, so that we can lower those levels of stress. The last thing that I'll let you know that has worked from a clinical perspective is glutathione. Glutathione, whether it's in capsule form or liquid form or liposomal form, has worked really well in my practice too. So, Kelly, looking forward to giving you all the details, but hopefully that helped a lot of other people right now to get the results that they need. Okay, Mary's up next. Hi, Mary. I have lupus. I was wondering if you have any information on this, whether it means managing it or recovering from it and no longer having it. On a related note, is there a way to increase complement levels C3 and C4 in your lab work? Thank you. I'm grateful for your show and the wonderful information. Okay, so basically, when you're looking at lupus, you can look at complement component 4. You can look at 3 as well. We're going to talk about 4 right now. It's a blood test, essentially, that measures a certain protein that's part of the complement system. And the complement system is really just a group of proteins in the bloodstream that we're looking at how these proteins work within your immune system and in the role of inflammation. And in lupus, we're looking at inflammation in the joints, and really, it can be overall. It can almost feel like fibromyalgia, but it is an inflammatory condition. And I would say it can lead to nervous system inflammation, joint-based inflammation, even the organs that I've seen with particular people. So it's hard to measure. We have this test, of course, but what we want to look at is a low level of C4 that's associated with autoimmune disorders in general, and even like vascular-based diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, those particular types of ones. So that's what I'm looking at specifically. I'm looking at a lot of times in RA and as well as lupus is some type of fatigue. I'm also looking at with lupus, it sets in sometimes earlier in life rather than rheumatoid arthritis, which yes, there's juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Sometimes that's not till the 40s. Lupus can be in the 20s and 30s. That, the interesting thing with lupus as well is it kind of like some weeks are good and some weeks might not be good. What I want to let you know from my research and my clinical perspective is that rheumatoid arthritis and lupus seem to be more what's called a Th1 immune system imbalance. So there's a few things that do help, like specifically DHEA at lower dosage, like 5 milligrams once or twice a day upon waking, then maybe right before lunch or so, have seemed to help with immune system balance. I use a lot of EPA and DHA omega-3s, not necessarily forever, but I certainly use them for a good 3 to 6 months with people. I get that dosage right around 3 grams of omega-3 combined DHA and EPA, not just total omega-3s. So the omega-3s that you'll see on my website are Pure Omega, and there's another one. So just go to stephencabrel.com/store. You'll see those. We'll try to link them up as well. And then vitamin D. Now, you should get lab tested. You should find out what your vitamin D levels are because they should be between 50 and 70. If they're in the 30s and 40s, they're too low. Bring them up. If they're around 80, 90, bring them down a little bit. Okay, it just means lowering your dose of vitamin D. So really, really important. What else can I tell you? Really important that you fix the gut. I'm telling you right now that most, if not all, autoimmune-based disorders start with intestinal permeability. It starts with the gut leaking out proteins, leaking out undigested proteins, which in Ayurveda, they knew this 6,000 years ago called ama. Ama is a source of toxins. Then once there's this increased permeability, this leaky gut, you start to spill out bacteria as well, both good and bad, but neither is good when it comes into your bloodstream. That causes immune-based reaction, which really hypersensitizes the immune system. And you can also get other pathogens such as yeast, or at least yeast-based waste components like arabinose or arabinic acid and succinic acid as well. So my opinion is this: run an organic acids test, clean up the gut, do whatever protocol that you need to do, and then work on balancing that imbalanced immune system. So many great things to do that. I wouldn't be able to do it justice on just a house call, but hopefully I got you started, which is really what the house call is all about. All right, Mary is up next. I'm not sure if it's the same Mary, but Mary has a second question. Can you suggest a protocol for weaning off antidepressants? So I'm going to do a whole show on depression, so I don't want to go over this in depth, but I do feel I need to answer your question. So depression has to be looked at in two standpoints, almost like every disease, right? My disease way back in the day needed to be resolved both psychologically and physiologically, okay? Physiologically, I got very sick. But then psychologically, I started to get really down, anxious, depressed, all of those things. I was in a tailspin. I didn't know what to do. No doctors, the best specialists in the world, the chief of staff at one of the number one hospitals in the world told me that I was either going to have to get more sick so I could figure out what was wrong with me, or is I just going to have to just wait it out and live like this. So they gave me no hope of recovery. That will make a young person or anyone pretty depressed. So what I can tell you is this, is that we need to make sure that when someone's depressed, again, it's not always because of an illness, that psychologically, I'm going to give you the physiological components as well, okay, because there are certain physiological components, so I never want to downplay that. Psychologically, when I see people depressed, a lot of times it's because they may have given up for one reason or another. It puts them in a low state. Let's just think of depressed as a low state, okay? Let's not put any stigma around it. But also, I've seen people who are depressed, they don't have a reason really for living. Now, I'm not saying like this in like a really negative way, but they don't see what their purpose is. So because they lack purpose, they lack that ambition, drive, and excitement for life. So like when you think about it, well, how do I get out of this? Well, first, you have to understand, you have to listen to the Mindset and Motivation Monday podcast, is that you do matter. Your life does matter. You do deserve to be happy. You have to believe that first, because if you don't believe that essential premise, that first premise, there's no way to pull yourself out of it. Now, I just want to let you know, I'm going to do a whole show on this. The way I pulled myself out was that I started to get angry. It's an interesting concept because when you're angry, you're not depressed. You can't be. Depressed is a low mood. Anger is starting to get an excitability mood, an irritability mood. It's not a good mood. I don't recommend staying angry, but it pulls you up one level. Now, it's nowhere near the level of happiness, but at least now you're not depressed. I got angry. I said, I'm not going to let these doctors tell me there's nothing wrong with me. That is all in my head. I'm not going to let them be right. I'm not going to let my life mean nothing and for me to just stay sick and depressed and weak the rest of my life. That is not how I want to live my life. That is not what I'm meant to do in life. That's not easy. I relapsed many times, but I kept fighting back. And that fighting back allowed me to try new things and then fail again, of course, and try new things and then fail and then try new things and get a little bit better. And that gave me motivation to keep continuing and trying and reading other people's stories and just pushing forward. But then I met some very great doctors. We call them alternative doctors, but as I've said before, there is no alternative to alternative medicine because there's only one way to get better, and that's to fix the body from an underlying root cause level. So here's what you need to do. You need to run a hair tissue mineral analysis. How do you know you don't have high levels of mercury or aluminum? How do you know you don't have high levels of copper? All of these things can put you in a more depressed state. How do you know that you're not in a 4-low pattern for electrolytes? That means your body is burnt out of electrolytes, electricity. You have no charge, no spark. What do you need to do? Well, you're in the adrenal exhaustion stage. That's a real thing. You don't have the electricity to keep you going. Well, when you start to rebuild your body, remember your brain is 20% of all the energy in your body. It weighs only 8 pounds, but it takes 20% of all the energy in your body. What if your digestive system is weak and that's drawing the energy out of your body, right? So you have to look at these things. What if you have bacterial overgrowth in your gut or candida overgrowth in your gut, and that's sending signals from your vagus nerve in your gut all the way up to your brain, telling you there's something wrong? What if there's something wrong with your gut, it's imbalanced, and now you're not producing enough serotonin because 90% of all the serotonin in your body is produced in your gut? All of these things matter. So hopefully you can start to see when you work with a good functional medicine practitioner, it doesn't have to be a doctor, that they will help you look at these different avenues. And what helped me as well is reading, just constantly reading, every day reading self-help books, psychology books, wellness books. I kept my mind focused on what I could do rather than what I couldn't. That's basically a whole show right there on depression, but I'm going to give you a little bit more in depth, okay? Hopefully, I have a very special place in my heart for people that are just down and out in life right now because I don't want them to stay there. I believe that the medical system is set up in a way that just doesn't care about people who come in with these particular issues because they can be more complicated and they just don't have time. Conventional medicine doesn't have time to deal with you. It's too bad. Sharon's up next. Dr. Cabral, my husband has night sweats. They range from not so bad to soaking wet. The sheets, the mattress, cover, everything. He practices extremely good self-care, great diet, freshly squeezed juices, exercises daily. He currently has no known health issues. Can you help me understand this? Thanks for your great podcast, Sharon. Okay, so I'll tell you right now, the main reasons, there's 3 that I've seen for night sweats in men. Women's just slightly different, but in men, usually I see an elevated evening cortisol. So because he's in good health, it doesn't mean he doesn't have high cortisol. High cortisol can actually translate to looking like you have endless energy. So what I would do is a adrenal hormone test, and I would make sure you do that last cortisol test, that last part of the saliva tube, right before bed to see what that saliva looks like. Great. Or you can even wake up, even when he wakes up in a sweat, if he does, then you can do the saliva test then. That will show you your cortisol as well. Another one is blood sugar dysregulation. So if someone drops in a low blood sugar at night, during the night, they will actually produce then more cortisol. That production of more cortisol can then lead to the night sweats as well. Okay, the third reason, before I get into an actual hormone-based, is parasites. A lot of people have parasites have night sweats at night. Parasites are anabolic little creatures. They're nocturnal, I should say, and they do the majority of their work during that cycle. Okay, that's what I've read. That's the research, and that's what I've seen in my practice, is that things seem to get a little worse at night. Now, in men, I don't know your husband's age, but there's something called andropause. And andropause is where men start to get lower testosterone. And that lower T, as we call it, causes night sweats sometimes. And the reason is there's essentially a dysregulation of the hypothalamus. So it's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, but it includes the testosterone and DHEA. And it's essentially a positive and negative feedback loop that's supposed to keep things in check. Now, you can test this again with adrenal hormone panel. It's just the saliva panel, the same one that checks the cortisol. Really my recommendation for your husband. And just keep in mind, if he's on any medications can cause this as well. So always check into all of those things. Okay, Kavita is our second to last question. Hello, Dr. Cabral. I've been following you on Instagram and listening to your podcast a lot lately. Your work and knowledge makes a lot of sense to me. I'm always looking for natural remedies for all problems in health and body related. Love Ayurveda and my path to regaining my health and weight. All that being said, I've been troubled by terrible migraines since the last 4 years. First, they were premenstrual and now they are post. They are debilitating and leave me helpless. I have tried meds. My struggle with weight loss continues, and you'll be waiting for the answer. Okay, great. Well, here we go. We've done a lot of shows on migraines and headaches. So I want you to check out these episodes. 445, which is the one I just did on the 10 treatments for headaches as well as migraines. 231, 274, and 330. Okay, we'll link those up in the show notes. Again, everyone who wants the show notes for today, just go to stevencabral.com/podcast. Click on today's show, which I don't even know what today's show is. I have my list of questions in front of me. I'll get that for you by the end of today's show. I'll link that up. So please take a look at that. The only thing that I probably didn't mention in that is that there can be a biomechanical issue called the trigeminal area of the neck, which is right behind the ears. It's what allows blood flow to come in and out of the head. And you can just make sure that you're in good postural alignment as well. So just make sure you didn't have an accident or something like that 4 years ago that might have taken you out of proper alignment. So just so everyone knows, today's show is 456. stevencabral.com/456 to get all of those show notes. All right, so that's your answer will be in-depth on those shows. Kavita and Yvonne is up next. Hi, doctor. I would like to ask you about hormone balance and if it's connected to whitest discharge from my vagina. I'm 28 this year. I'm currently having my acne on the chin area with slightly dark patch armpits. Whitest discharge was since last year with no itchiness, but when I have sex, it's painful. No burning sensation or bleeding. Thank you for your time. Okay, a couple things going in here. We'll get to the white discharge in one moment. Painful sex can often be lowered hormones. So I just want to make sure that when you, again, it just seems to be the adrenal hormone panel today. Yours isn't so much cortisol, although remember, in a roundabout kind of way, cortisol will steal progesterone. When your progesterone is low and your estrogen is low, I know you're only 28, but it can be low because of previous stress or too low cholesterol on your blood work. Remember, too low a cholesterol is not a good thing either. Your levels should be between 160 and 200. So check that as well. So the painful sex, just keep in mind, can absolutely be a hormone-based issue. If it's more painful at the beginning of your cycle and more painful the last few days of your cycle, that could absolutely be lowered hormones. If it's not as painful, let's say the middle 2 weeks of your cycle, that's when the hormones are a little higher, estrogen, and then by the third week, day 21, progesterone. It's a good thing to just keep in mind to look at. All right, so just keep that in mind. Now, the whitest discharge, if there's no itchiness, it may not be a candida-based issue. All right, it might not be. What it could be, though, is still it could be bacterial vaginosis, which I've talked about a few times. So let me link that up. That's 358, 359, 281, and 435. I've spoken about each of those shows about bacterial vaginosis and how to deal with that through vaginal suppositories, the organic acid test, as well as the candida and the bacterial overgrowth on the gut protocol. And the reason is that the vaginal flora shares the same flora, which is bacteria, as the gut, the intestines. So it's really important to keep both balanced, especially with small intestinal-based strains like Lactobacillus acidophilus. That's where I would start. So the other thing is this, is that it depends. It's really hard for me to talk about this just through this question alone. But some discharge is not abnormal, meaning that when you're ovulating, you're going to have some discharge. It's more of a clear mucus rather than a white discharge. So that's the only thing that's throwing me off. But that's normal. That's a good way to show right now. It's a good sign in terms of fertility that you're ovulating. It'll be clear and it will be a little stretchy, the mucus itself. And that's how we test really which days you're ovulating. So hopefully that answer helps at least point you in the right direction. It may not be something bad, but there's probably some type of imbalance right now because it is a whitish discharge. It might be happening throughout your cycle, and that's a different story. And then there's the pain during sex, and that could again be the lowered hormones. So please look into this. Again, I gave you the episodes, which is 358, 359, 281, and 435, all of those about bacterial vaginosis and just discharge in general. So thank you everyone for tuning into the Cabral concept and our weekend Cabral House Calls. Love answering your questions. I hope you stay tuned tomorrow for more of our community's questions. Take care.
Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.